Greetings, everyone. Koku here. I just wanted to hop on real quick before we start the show, just to remind you guys where we're at in our reading of the book Nationbuilding. Last we left off, we were just finished reading about the curriculum domains, the 5 curriculum domains that provide the basis for the organization of the subject content within the curriculum. That's very important. If you're out there and you're trying to create, like we are, you're trying to create a new, updated, African centered and eventually Pan-African centered, if you will, curriculum. The idea is that you need to have a basis for which to start from, and I think this is a good one. Like we discussed last time, the 5 areas are cultural or ideological, spiritual or psychoaffective, socio-political and economic, which is a great one because that includes political economy, cognition and inquiry, technology, mathematics, sciences, computer sciences, very important, right? And that leads us into the 4th domain, which is technology, which includes the things that you expect under technology: mathematics, science, computer science, functional skills. I've talked about these things in past episodes, that this is what the Black community needs to invest in more. There's a connection between science or STEM and technology and commerce, and we got to start getting into that a little bit more. And then the last domain was nation building, right, which is the practical application of all the things that you learned before. That includes career development, apprenticeships. Check the last episode that we did last Thursday, where we talked about the apprenticeship programs by the W.E.B in Nigeria. It's interesting. You should check that out. Also, there's research theory and practicums, right? There's community development projects. There's organizational experience. That community development projects is important. An education for our children is supposed to be one that ties them back to their community, their traditions, right? And, which is ultimately their people. And so you want to be able to have a education that gets them into practice of developing communities that they live in, so that ultimately we have the skills, the knowledge, the know-how on how to develop the continent, right? So that conversation, that was the end of our last episode. That brings us into the ideological themes, and that's what we're going to pick up tonight. So just stay tuned. We'll be back on the other side to discuss ideological themes.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. Before we continue our reading of Nation Building, let's just remind you guys really quickly that this show, the Bitter Medicine Podcast, is a part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows on the network that you guys are invited to listen to.
This is W.E.B with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure to tune in to all of those shows. The Revolutionary Matron with her show, The Learning Curve, had another great episode with Rock Soldier last night. You guys should tune into that. The Harsh Reality Podcast, I'm sure, is dropping something new soon. And the Pro-Black Perspective, with only to say, he just returned back from Ghana. And this past Sunday, his show was showing pictures and, relating stories and stuff to us from his trip to Ghana. You should definitely check that out as well. So it was a good time. So check out all those shows. The website for KWAZ Radio is coming. We plan to unveil that at the beginning of 2022, but the work is being put in right now. If you'd like to donate to that endeavor, right, because there's always a cost to these things. If you'd like to help alleviate some of the costs, and you'd like to donate to this endeavor, you could cash app KWAZ Radio at $ KWAZ Radio. If you want to, you could also cash app this show, $ Bittermeds, BITTERMEDZ, or Z. You could cash app the show as well. Again, the donations go towards improving the shows, and that's true for all the shows, by the way. So, ideological themes. So we talked about the 5 domains of curriculum, and now we're talking about some of the ideological themes. The design here requires a further elaboration of the design explored in the Social Studies Guide. The organizing factors here are derived of 2 of the same considerations, cognitive and ideological. The ideological considerations flow directly from the ACTI and serve as general themes in the organization and presentation of learning experiences. The ideological themes serve to reinforce a sense of holism and cultural awareness that is essential to the Afrikan Centered curriculum. The themes were chosen because they correspond to the major tenets of the Afrikan Centered historical or cultural construct. Additionally, they facilitate the transmission of the principal values of Pan-Africanist nationalist ideology. The ideological themes also correspond to levels of cognitive ability and task readiness of the Mawan Funzi. If we use Bloom's taxonomy of thinking skills, foundations and identity correspond to knowledge and comprehension. Harmony and rhythm are analogous to application and analysis. Independence and spirit correspond to synthesis and evaluation. The ideological themes or determinations include A, foundations, which includes 1, origins, 2, basic concepts, 3, generative themes, 4, fundamental values, 5, ancestral wisdom, 6, language. Then B is identity, right? Again, we're talking about these ideological themes. B is identity, and that includes 1, consciousness, 2, purposefulness, 3, particularity. C is harmony, which includes 1, unity, 2, coherency, 3, organization, 4, clarity, 5, reciprocity, 6, resolution. D is rhythm, which includes 1, process, 2, energy or force, 3, pattern. E is independence, which includes freedom, power, self-determination, resistance, permanence. And then F is spirit, faith, holism, metaphysic, and transcendence. The ideological themes are designed to act as bridging for subject content, cognitive objectives, and the cultural ideological objectives. The following is an example of their application. So this should be good, right? This should be good. So we see here this 4-column table, if you will. So at the top it says subject content. Under that is integers, followed by cognitive. Under that is identification attributes, followed by cultural referent, Under that is arguments pro and con regarding repatriation. And then there's ideological. Under that is foundations, origins, values, harmony, unity, reciprocity, etc. These ideological determinants are cross-referenced with the cognitive determinants. For each of the several cognitive phases, there is a set of learning objectives in each curricular field. Each learning experience is further organized according to the several ideological themes. So there's an interweaving here that's going on. And this is what makes the curriculum more whole or holistic, right? And this is what we really need. I teach biology on a college level. And the one thing I notice every semester, and it's getting worse and worse as the years go by, is that students are not being taught the sciences in a way that interconnects the sciences as they should be. You shouldn't be a chemistry major, for example, and not study biology, right? In fact, I doubt there's any place that you study that you could be a chemistry major and not do any biology. But the problem I'm seeing is that students themselves are not connecting concepts. And that's because they're learning for today. They're not learning for tomorrow. And this is what we want to avoid with our kids. We want our kids to understand that everything that they're learning today is for tomorrow, number one. Number two, that everything they're learning today is interconnected, interwoven, right? You don't go into biology and learn about macromolecules, right? These biological molecules, and not understand the chemistry involved with these molecules, right? All of these molecules that are called macromolecules are made up of carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, sometimes nitrogens, phosphorus, sulfur. All these things I'm listing right here, you're going to find that in organic chemistry. And so you need to be able to know your chemistry as you're doing your biology, and vice versa, right? If you're doing research in chemistry, some type of surfactant research in a biological system, you need to understand biology as well. And so this is the problem you see with this public school system, and even this college education that they're giving out here. It's very narrow. And the students like it because it means that they're not being challenged heavily. But the fact of the matter is they suffer ultimately. This is why you don't get a lot of big research discoveries out of the US, in my opinion, anymore. Because how the students are learning the sciences don't really work. Now, what you'll find coming out of the US is a lot of work being done with computers. So if you're talking bioinformatics and stuff like that, which is basically statistics within biology, you'll find a lot of work being done there. But that work that really pulls together physics with chemistry and biology, you don't find a whole lot of that happening amongst younger researchers today. But I digress. So the three ideological determinants are cross-referenced with the cognitive determinants. For each of the several cognitive phases, there is a set of learning objectives in each curricular field. Each learning experience is further organized according to the several ideological themes. Cognitive determinants and phases of development. The cognitive determinants of the curriculum correspond to that sequence of non-discrete phases beginning with childhood and progressing through eldership. Each phase has a social focus and a cognitive focus. The organization of the several phases derive from the sustained and active observation, interaction, and expectations of members of several independent Black institutions over the course of 2 decades. It has been observed that while there is a general pattern of development common to all children, the specific nature of that development will occur in accordance with the conscious and unconscious expectations and demands of the family and broader culture, given adequate culturally or socially supportive institutions and practices. Consequently, any list of phases of development is as much a statement of observed human development as it is a statement of culturally and socially determined expectations of each member of that society. The cognitive and social focus mentioned above corresponds to the unique potentialities of the individual for humanness and those culturally determined expectations and needs of the collective. So humanness is a huge traditional African concept, right? Where Africans have always seen the humanity within each other, right? I am because you are. And there's always been a kind of a collective thought, right? And again, if you're going to be creating an African-centered curriculum, one of the things that's a key ingredient to this part is you have to push the idea of humanness to African children. But the thing I want people not to make, the mistake I don't want people to make is we don't want to raise another generation of bleeding heart humanists where you want to take every hit dog that hollers and you want to cape, you want to cape for them. We don't got the time for that. We don't got time for more black people being educated in this thing where a Palestinian cries out for help and all of a sudden now we all damn near Palestinian because we're crying for the needs of this Palestinian who doesn't give a shit about the needs of an African. We just got to be real about this, right? So this is a good paradigm to have included, of course, but you have to stare that to we view the humanness of each other as black equals African people, right? The paradigm of individual duty to the collective is fundamental to the African spiritual psychic makeup. This is why you have to have it. It is the role of the Wazazi, the parents and teachers, to identify and facilitate the realization of those potentialities in such a way that they are harmonized with the character and dynamic of the collective. Thus, potentialities should unfold in a way that they enhance the collective, and the collective reciprocates in nurturing the realization of the individual's full and unique humanity. The interrelationship is fully reciprocal and mutually enriching. Phases of development is the next section. Phase 1, immediacy, social focus, family and self, cognitive focus, identification, and interpretation of the immediate and the concrete. So the social focus, right, is the people around you as well as yourself, family and self. The cognitive or the thought focus is to be able to identify and interpret the things that are happening around you and happening around you right now. This phase recognizes the primal and central role of the family in the formation of the individual. It is in this initial phase that the essential conception of self as an extension of the collective is established. Cognitive development is focused primarily on establishing meaning and patterns in the immediate social environment. Beyond emotional stimuli, the environment is perceived in concrete and narrow terms. Language, behaviors, and values are acquired primarily through imitation of model behaviors of family members. This phase includes the early and much of the middle childhood years. Phase 2, abstraction. The social focus here is peer and age group and community. The cognitive focus is creative and critical thought, theoretical elaboration. The onset of this phase is occasioned by the period of pubescence. During this phase, the social focus is expanded to include the peer or age group and a sense of community. The family focus of the earlier phase is not lost, however. In fact, the effective functioning at the community level assumes a firm grounding in the family collective. There is a conscious effort to shape one's personality through self-evaluation of frequent trial and responses of peers. This is a period of intense self-consciousness. It is at this stage that philosophical speculation and logical thought can be sustained, although the experiential base of mature rational thought is as yet lacking. The assertion of this new cognitive ability and the corresponding increase in mastery of symbolic forms, including verbal and non-verbal language, often assumes a rebellious nature. Actions and thought at this phase are typically impulsive and superficial. It is at this phase that historical consciousness and cultural awareness is grasped, though its significance is not often fully appreciated. I'm reading this and thinking about my own kids. This is a period of intense physical, intellectual, and spiritual energy. It is also a period where parental involvement and institutional and community support and guidance is most needed, both for the healthy maturation of the child and the future of the community. Phase 3 is realization. Social focus here is community or nation. Cognitive focus is symbolic and pragmatic synthesis and creativity. In this phase, the socio-historical consciousness matures and becomes a considered element in one's behavior. Awareness of that historical process and the attendant cultural awareness matures, and the corresponding need to establish one's place in that historical process is awakened. The issue of one's role and place in society becomes paramount and is consummated in the establishment of family. The issue of personal productivity is consummated in career. Personal experience as well as the experience and history of the collective are prominent features in decision-making and personal deliberations. Phase 4 is consummation. The social focus here is race and universe. The cognitive focus is holism, intuition, legacy, and spirit force. How many of you feel like you're in the phase 4 of your life still? Type 1 if you feel like you're still in this phase 4 of your life, where your social focus is race and universe, and your cognitive focus is holism, intuition, legacy, and spirit force, right? Having successfully established family and self and satisfied those duties and responsibilities associated with maintenance and development of the community and nation, one enters the 4th phase, that of consummation. This phase is marked by a fully developed worldview and life philosophy. The focal point of reference is the holistic nature of being and becoming. The concern with one's own legacy is balanced with the urgency to share one's lessons of life in an effort to facilitate the maximal development of those generations that follow. There is a unique awareness of the spiritual force and one's proximity to that force. And this allows me to speak on something that I see bandied about kind of recklessly too. I posted on Twitter earlier today that we have got to stop. We have got to stop celebrating inaction and disunity. We have got to stop celebrating inaction and disunity. We revel in the idea that you're not going to get a significant number of people to come together, right? That's failing before trying. The reality is, and sometimes I go back and forth within my own thoughts about this. But you know what I came to realize recently? That the reality is we do need the numbers. And we have to stop celebrating the fact that there's this idea that we just won't get them without first trying. We have to get the numbers. You know why we have to get the numbers? Because we need a number of teachers. We need a number of schools. We need a number of parents involved. We need a number of children in these schools. We do need numbers. The numbers of us who have survived, who are still alive and still living through phase 4, means that we all have the duty to return to the youth and give them these lessons of our own legacy, the lessons of having, more years on this planet, of seeing more things, of going through more BS, if you will, and kind of helping these folks who are coming up navigate this world that they're maturing into, that we've already matured into. And so, you know what? Forget all that, foolish talk. Yeah, I know it's hard to do, to get people to get together and to do a thing. But if you have that mentality that you won't get the people, then you won't. And we need people on board. We really do need people on board. The folks who are sitting up, spending time watching reality TV and stuff, we have to find a way to get through to that person. To not do so is to be lazy, and in fact, it's to be intellectually lazy as well. We got to stop being lazy people. We got to stop doing the minimum and acting like we're doing the most. You could have all these great projects in mind. You could have a DVD project in mind. You could have a book project in mind. You could have this, that, and the other. But the reality of it is, who are you going to even sell that stuff to if you don't have people? Let's stop being lazy going forward. Let's really start putting together programs to engage people and bring people in. And that's going to require us to have to get out there on the streets and do it. And so that's what we have to do now. We have to start working on numbers. If you think you're going to take down this system that has all this time and pacing and spacing ahead of us, with one person and his 12 disciples, you're a damn fool. In fact, you're more foolish than a Christian. I was going to say you're as foolish, but no, in fact, you're more foolish than a Christian or Muslim or whatever. If you think that just sitting up and doing some things for yourself is going to bring down this system and usher in an age, a renaissance for Black equals African people worldwide, you're crazy. You need the numbers. You need the numbers. And to bring it back to what we're reading here, you need the numbers in this phase right here. Those of us who have managed to survive long enough to have a pretty good, pretty well-developed worldview, a pretty well-developed philosophy of life. We need to be the ones now who turn around and give some of these life lessons to these youth coming up so that they don't have to go and rethread the pitfalls that we fell into. They don't find themselves behind the curve because they didn't have the information like we didn't have the information when we were youth. And furthermore, we need to take these life lessons that we've been blessed to live long enough to have and turn it into some form of institutions that these kids can go to these institutions and receive the guidance and the help that they need. So again, they don't have to rethread the mistakes that we've made and our parents made, right? And so that they could they could be ahead of the game. We need those numbers. Let's stop being intellectually lazy about that too. Let's stop celebrating the fact that, oh, you can't get no one to come together and all this kind of stuff. Well, did you try? And if you tried and you failed, did you try it again? And fix the problems for why you failed the first time. We got to get serious about this stuff. To continue, curriculum fields. Curricular fields. The 5 curricular domains: cultural or ideological, spiritual or psycho-affective, socio-political or economic, technology, and nation building, provide the basis for organizing the several curricular fields and their component subject areas. The domains also provide the basis for organizing the teacher into teams for the actual instructional process. Additionally, the domains provide the basis for the organization of the class schedule. The schedule should provide blocks of time not less than 90 minutes for each class. Again, a lot of people who have African-centered, independent African-centered schools, they follow this book, by the way. I don't know if you guys listening are really paying attention. I hope you are. In fact, I hope you guys are writing stuff down as you're listening, right? Because this little tidbit right here, it might seem frivolous. In fact, I'm sure a lot of people kind of breeze through it. But if you aren't sitting with information as a learner, if you aren't sitting with information for 90 to say 120 minutes at a time, you aren't seriously, you're not seriously processing that information, right? If you want to study for, say, a human resources certification, in fact, forget that. When I was an undergrad, I remember there was this rule. How many of you who remember this kind of spoken yet unspoken rule? Spoken but unwritten rule, so to speak. If your class was 3 credits, that means you had to study at least, what was it? What was the math on it? Was it 3 hours per credit or 2? I think it was 2 hours per credit. You had to study 2 or 3 hours per credit. So each week, this 3 credit class that you have, with all the other classes that you're taking with it, this class in particular, you're supposed to be putting in 6 to 9 hours per week on that one class. Like it was a formula, and I've kind of forgotten it now. Because the students that I interact with on college level, they never talk about it. Right? But this was all the stuff that we used to talk about back in the day when I was an undergraduate, right? There's a formula for this stuff. If you're not sitting down at least an hour and a half to 2 hours with new information or with information you're trying to process to be able to later on recall under some type of pressure situation, like an exam or what have you, or a job or something, you got to be putting in this kind of time. And we're talking daily here. You know, so that's an important little tidbit that they threw in there, by the way. The curricular fields and the subject areas include the following. So here we're going back through those 5 curricular fields, and now this time we're adding, right, some of the ideological ideas that we just read through, right? So cultural or ideological, you have history. Under that, African American history, civilizations of the world, classical African civilizations, concepts and applications, current trends and developments, Holocaust of African enslavement, Pan-African world history. So, and then lastly, world geography. So that's why sometimes you'll hear me say creating an African-centered curriculum, or sometimes you'll hear me add a Pan-African centered. I think it's very important if you're studying history as an African, as a Black equals African student, if you're studying history, I think it's very important to understand the significant movements, being revolutions, being what have you, right? In different places where Black people are. So, for example, if you're going to talk about Pan-African world history, you got to be learning about Maurice Bishop in Grenada. You know, you should probably learn about so Lyndon Pendling in the Bahamas, or Eric Williams down in Trinidad, or different folks all over the continent, like Nyerere, for example, right? Sankara, of course, Nkrumah, of course. But learning about these different peoples and the things that they did, Amilcar Cabral, Steve Biko, tell me what you really know about that great man, Steve Biko, right? So that's why I sometimes put in a Pan-African centered curriculum, right? Not just talking about the continent, not just relating where you are to the continent, as they're doing here, but also relating where you are to other folks, other Black people, to where they are that might not be in the continent, might not be in the U.S., but you might want to follow. For example, Steve McQueen had this little mini-series. That's the Black director from the UK. He had this little mini-series talking about like Black power movements and stuff in Britain. And that's where you saw depictions of C.L.R. James, the Trinidadian lawyer, and stuff like that. Right, so it's that kind of thing you want to definitely have, and so I'm glad that they're kind of showing you now how to mix up these domains with these ideologies and these themes and stuff like that. So that's history. Next is language and culture. African languages, absolutely. When I was speaking to Obadale Cambone, he mentioned learning Twi as a language, which I had never even thought about, because I was under that thinking of like, well, that's so regional, right? Wouldn't it be cooler to learn something like Kiswahili, where, from what I understand, and I should ask Oni about this too, from what I understand, you could go pretty much anywhere in the continent and find someone speaking Kiswahili, right? So, but here you see they have it listed. Regional languages like Twi, Wolof, Yoruba, Zulu, Amharic, or Pan-African languages like Kiswahili, right? Concepts and applications, current trends and developments, Mechu Necher, which is classical African language and script. Other languages, European, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Asian, Chinese, Japanese. Now, some might look at that and be like, well, why the hell are you learning that? Or those languages? I mean, to be honest, if you have a nation, nations do businesses with other nations. That's just the reality of it. So there might be a need where, at least in the time being, there would be a need. As you're trying to build this African nation, you might have to make some deals with some people. And we got to be real about that. And the reason why we have to be real about that is because we don't want to be African, and then you slip in, oh, well, we got to work with these Chinese over here. That could throw off some people. It's like me going to a Black political organization's meetings and seeing a white boy there with his Black woman. That throws me off and puts a bad taste in my mouth towards that organization, right? So I can see the need for the other languages, per se, to a lesser extent, of course, than to your African language, both regional and Pan-African, right? Meju Necher. That's something I keep starting it and never could really sit down and finish it. Hopefully with this work on curriculum, I get to and through it. The next area is culture and creative expression, aesthetics, Afrocentric, audiovisual communication, concepts and applications, current trends and development, literature, African literature, that, literature, international models. Let me tell y'all something, in case you don't know. Not to sound like a homer, but the Caribbean has great literature. Are y'all hearing me? If you like Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, the Caribbean has great literature. And as a matter of fact, if you have children around you, I would suggest you start getting some of that literature. And if you want to know some authors and books, you can hit me up on the Discord. The link is right there in the description, right there at the top of the chat. Join the Discord today, hit me up, and ask me for some of these authors. I'll be glad to tell you. To continue. Music and dance, traditional and modern African dance, speech and debate, visual arts, traditional and modern African, including electronic media, written and expression, creative and functional, right? So then we go on to philosophy and ideology. African nationalism and Pan-Africanism, of course, has to be at top of the list. Classical and traditional African philosophical systems, concepts and applications, current trends and developments, European and Asian philosophies. So I could say this, and I've said this before in the show. You want to know what these other folks' philosophies are. Because if you understand the philosophies, you understand their movements. If you understand their movements, it's better to understand them in times of war, in times of conflict, which you are actively in right now. One of the problems with Black equals African folks is that we don't understand the Europeans' philosophy. Under that art of war stuff, Sun Tzu, that's real shit. That's a part of their philosophy. They use that in business and all kinds of facets of life. They use that stuff, right? You want to understand it as well. You definitely want our youth coming up in an African Centered education to understand the enemy and how they think. That brings us to spiritual and psychoaffective, ethics and morality, African spiritual systems, classical and traditional. Classical and traditional ethical moral system, for example, Ma'at. What do the Akan believe as far as their moral systems? The Kikuyu, what do they believe? Concepts and applications, current trends and developments, other spiritual religious systems of the world. So you see these current trends and developments, concepts and applications, that occurs. So you'll see that a lot in things like a curriculum. Because I remember being not a kid, but a young adult and looking at something like this before and seeing this repetition, concepts and applications or current trends and developments, and being like, man, that's real lazy. But it took me a little while to understand what it really is about. So as an instructor, let's say you're a teacher in an African Centered school and just going about in your own life, reading a newspaper article or reading something in a magazine and thinking to yourself how this topic can relate to something you're studying in, with your children in school, right? This is where you would bring that in, right? Some of you are unfortunately biblical people. Maybe you're reading something in the Bible or something. Well, let's scratch that because we don't want you bringing no Bible stuff to these kids. But let's say you're reading something in the Kebra Nagas or something like that, right? And it relates to something you've been discussing this whole week in school with your students. Then you'll bring that to the trend. You're reading something, there's an uprising going on right now in what's the country? Swaziland, right? There's an uprising in Swaziland. You're reading about it in the newspaper. You're on Twitter and you see Pan-African Alliance drop something about it, or you see Africa Archives drop some tweet about what's going on, and you bring that tweet and all, you bring that to the classroom, you show it to the students, and you discuss, right? That's that kind of thing. The next thing is self-knowledge, concepts and applications, current trends and developments, right? So you're going to find that in probably all of these, by the way. Family and interpersonal relations, models of leadership. Booker T. Washington has a great book on character building, I think fits well in here. Personal philosophy. What is your personal philosophy? Do you guys listening, do you have a personal philosophy? How long have you had it? Was it something that was, for you, was it something that was started in your early education, primary education, or did it happen in secondary school, or did it happen in tertiary school, college, university type stuff, right? And then lastly, physical development and self-defense. That's a great addition right there. Physical development and self-defense. One of the problems I have with the school system, the public school system, and this is even in my own hometown, I have this problem. You're doing PE, physical education, but you're not teaching the youth how to eat, how to pair foods. You're not really teaching them how to hydrate. You're just telling them some general thing. Oh, drink 8 glasses of water a day. But there's really a way to go about eating foods. And as a matter of fact, this is what Dr. Sebi used to talk about, which I believe in. That there's an African diet. As a matter of fact, when Onita Say was doing his presentation on his trip to Ghana, to Africa, there was a minute in the chat where me and another person were discussing, the food. Something Oni said, I can't remember what he said now, but something he said made me, he said that most of the people, when you go to the continent, you go to Ghana, most of the people are fit, are like in good shape. The women are beautifully melanated, nice figures, etc. And I said, yeah, there's an African diet. They're not eating what we're eating, so much. I mean, they got shit there. They got pizza and all that stuff there, as only showed. But for the most part, when you eat, even in the Caribbean, if you eat that Caribbean diet, you're different. It's when they brought in the American foods, the KFCs and the burger shops and all that kind of stuff. That's when stuff started to get crazy, But when we was just eating yam and cassava and some boiled fish or something like that, things were nice back then, But the schools didn't teach you how to eat. They had you running. You might play a little ball, little softball, little baseball or whatever, cricket, soccer, things of that nature. But you didn't learn any self-defense. They didn't really put you in a position, I would say, to really learn about yourself. Because the problem with a lot of that stuff anyway was that you had the peer pressure stuff going on. You were self-conscious, as this reading talked about earlier. You reach that age where you're very self-conscious, and a lot of times that doesn't motivate you to be your best self in whatever it is you're doing. So it's deep. It's deep, and I don't want this simple bullet listings to throw people off on how deep and how much work you really need to put into that physical development and that personal philosophy, and how important that self-defense is. I was in school, and you would think, like in high school, you would think that you could do boxing or something. You couldn't. It just wasn't there. And that's the kind of stuff we have to start getting into these curriculum. But to continue, actually, wait a minute. I've been talking for a little bit here, and I haven't paused for a station break. Let's pause here for a station break. I want you guys to check out the other shows on KWAZ Radio.
This is W.E.B with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
By the way, if you or anyone you know of who you think would benefit from being a part of the KWAZ Radio podcast network, you guys should listen to this, or have whoever you have in mind to listen to this.
Have you ever considered joining KWAZ Radio? Each of our hosts shares their unique perspective with you. You might have a perspective that needs to be shared. If that's true, hit us up at kwaz.radio@gmail.com. What are you gonna do? What you gonna do?
That's right. What are you going to do? Make sure to let people know that we're open to have other shows on KWAZ Radio. We're trying to really get the situation going in the continent. That has its difficulties, but we're trying to get there. We're definitely open to the Caribbean, definitely open to the UK and South and Central America as well. We want to have a podcast network that's Pan-African, where you can get your news and updates in one central location. Like I said, the website is being built. It's coming. We're going to unveil that at the beginning of the new year. Like I said, also, too, if you want to donate, Cash App them at $ KWAZ Radio to help out with the costs. So, yeah, we're building. And we need you guys to spread the word that we're looking for other podcasters who are knowledgeable in different areas than what you see here on KWAZ Radio as it is. So things like African spirituality, self-defense, economics, languages, African languages, etc. We're looking for those types of folks to bring a concept to life, based on what they do. And you guys can help with that. Have them reach out to kwaz.radio@gmail.com. All right, so we're still reading the breakdown. I'm personally loving this breakdown. If you're loving the breakdown of this curriculum now that we started to add some of the ideological themes to the 5 curricular areas, I'm starting to like what I'm seeing here. So we're on socio-political and economic. So that, of course, includes political science, African Americans, and electoral politics. So that's important, right? This writing was for Black America. So wherever you are, you need to have this political understanding, right? So if you're in the UK, it will be African Brits and the electoral politics, or what have you. Or if you're in the Caribbean, it's the African or Afro-Caribbeans and the electoral politics, right? Next is concepts and applications, current trends and developments. Like I said, you're going to see that. Government, which is national and local. Holocaust of African enslavement, always have to have that in there. International relations, racism and Western development, U.S. history. right? Under this socio-political and economic area is also business and economic development. So you get to learn banking and investments, concepts and applications, current trends and developments, economic development models, and economics. So that's important. The majority of our people don't understand economics. And what little economics they do understand, they understand it from a European thought. We have to start understanding economics and building alternative economic systems for ourselves. The next area is technology, mathematics. Remember, we talked about these things. So under technology, there's mathematics. So some of the themes you want to cover is algebra, right? Algebra 1 and 2, trigonometry, arithmetic. And by the way, while you're teaching them this, you see, this is where the interconnectedness comes in. While you're teaching them this stuff here, arithmetic, calculus, trigonometry, in their history classes, they're supposed to be learning about how mathematics is African, how chemistry is African, right, etc. So keep that in mind as well. Calculus, concepts and applications, current trends and developments, general mathematics, geometry, historical contributions, current involvement, and social utility. That's an important last bullet there too. That adds to what I was talking about. But it also, when I said they're also in history learning about the fact that these mathematics comes from Africa, etc. But it's also important, and again, this is where the school systems fail. The learner must understand the reason for why he or she is learning this stuff. Like, I had this thought back in high school. Like, wouldn't it be cool if a teacher is teaching you something? Let's say they're teaching you something to deal with Pythagoras theorem, right? Wouldn't it be cool if they're teaching you that, but the example that they're giving you is like construction of a bridge or construction of a roof or something like that? So that now, because understand what I'm saying. The student sitting there is going to say, well, I see a roof every day. I see bridges every so often. And now I understand the mathematics, right? Using Pythagoras, for example. Now I understand the mathematics, the social utility of it. But when you just sit a kid down, you talk about A and B and a kid is going to start to daydream and lose focus on what you're talking about. But when you ground it or root it in the kid's reality, hey, remember the George Washington Bridge that you went over? So here's a picture of the George Washington Bridge. And if you look here, you could see an example of a right angle triangle, for example. And here you could do the mathematics of Pythagoras theorem. And like, if you do that, you'll have the interest of these students way more. You have to bring it back to its social utility. Next is science, right? Agronomy, astronomy, biology, chemistry, concepts and applications, current trends and developments. They should put that at the end, by the way, of the bullets. General science, health and nutrition, historical contributions, current involvement and social utility, life sciences, physical sciences, physics, technology, and national development, right? Computer science is here. Applications, concepts and applications, current trends and developments, historical contributions, current involvement, social utility, right? Literacy, including survey of modern development in computer and communications networks, programming, systems design, and analysis. Now remember too, this book was written in the 90s. So this book was written with Fortran in mind and BASIC right, in mind. Just keep that in mind. We have to do the work to update this for today to C++, JavaScript, etc. All right, and for these kids have all these different, Python and I forget the one that I was showing my kids back in the day. I forgot it now, but yeah, they have these other examples, and you as simple as just trying to get them to build a game for themselves goes a long way. Scratch is a pretty simple programming language that kids find a lot of fun in. Right, functional skills, automobile maintenance, carpentry, concepts and applications, current trends and developments, domestic, electrical, and mechanical systems, typing. You see what I'm saying? Again, I hope you guys either have the book, and if you want a copy, like what I'm reading from right now, you could join the Discord and go to the Bitter Medicine Library and download you a copy of the book. Right? If you're inspired by the reading and you want to do more than just read the book, but actually work on a curriculum, hit me up on the Discord as well. Let's get to work. So this brings us to that fifth area of the curriculum domains is nation building, right? Which is practical applications. And in here you have career development and apprenticeship. So you have career orientation, work experience. Again, this is stuff that has to be geared towards working for, with, and around your own people. And this is why I say we got to get those numbers up. We have folks out here who own plumbing businesses, who own human resources businesses, and what have you, right? Who are black folks. We got to get them on board. We have to get them thinking a certain way. So that when we push our children through our own education systems, they don't have to come out here and go beg this white boy for a job. Like I had to do. And man, I'm sure many of you had to do as well. But that they can have all this knowledge. I mean, look at this curriculum, the bare bones of this curriculum we just outlined here in the last 10, 20 minutes. Imagine you have a kid, a young adult who's coming out of high school or coming out of tertiary schools, right? And you have the chance. I'm not talking about one or two kids, but a glut of kids are coming out, and you have the chance to choose from them with this type of background to them. Imagine that. That's what we're supposed to be working with, and we need more of our people on board. That's just the bottom line. Research theory and application, Africology, and research methodology. That's something I would like to do, right? Field research experience, social, anthropological, etc. I mean, the fact that like you have these Arabs clamoring all over our ancient ancestors in Kemet. These Brits are opening up the tombs of our ancient ancestors in Kemet. We should be embarrassed by that. Instead, we make jokes about, oh, they're going to unleash the plague like in the movie The Mummy and all that kind of old shit. We should be embarrassed that they can defile. Because our ancient ancestors didn't want these fuckers gripping their tombs open and all that kind of stuff. Right? Taking merchandise and all this kind of stuff. Right? At least if it was our people control, we would have some respect, some decency towards what the ancient ones, wanted. Right? But if you are creating people who can do this, who can do this kind of field research, right? If you are grooming those people yourselves, of course, with this humanness and everything that's included in this curriculum, you would have people who would go and do the work, go and study and learn, but with respect. They're not going to destroy or tarnish or rewrite in their own bullshit likeness or whatever. They're going to come back with the truth of our ancient African ancestors. Next is community development project, field experience, needs analysis, and project design. I love to hear that. You know how dope it would be to walk outside and meet some of our youth assessing the neighborhoods that we live in, the countries that we inhabit, figuring out what's needed. In fact, you know, again, the Pro-Black Perspective had an interesting conversation in his last episode that I think a lot of people don't even check, right? So in New York here, in Brooklyn, there was a time a couple years ago where they were setting up these like free Wi-Fi hotspots in these neighborhoods. And of course, these neighborhoods were all white, affluent neighborhoods. And I remember hearing some black folks complain like, yo, why don't they bring that to where the people who need it most can get it, which is, of course, poor people, right? But I was only pointing it out, and as I've told people in the past, like, yo, really and truly, you just have to be honest about it. Poor people who tend to be, especially those who tend to be generationally poor, their habits, right? The kind of habits that they have mean that they don't really do too much. It's a lot of sitting around idle, to be honest. I walk out my place every day and I see it by this park that I live by. There's a lot of idleness going on. Why would you waste time, money, resources in creating an infrastructure in that area with free Wi-Fi when the folks they ain't gonna use it for nothing really productive if they use it at all? So when you start and see, it requires you to start thinking on a nation building level. If you think on a nation building level, you'll understand what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Now, eventually, everyone should get the technology. But at first go around, you're going to give that technology, whatever it is. In that example I just gave, it was free Wi-Fi, right? Free Wi-Fi and charging stations for phones and stuff. You're going to give that to the affluent people. In fact, those are the people who's being taxed a lot, taxed and giving into the system. So those are the people who are going to get it first, which is why at the end of last year, beginning of this year, I told you guys, man, you want to practice the mentality of abundance. Seek abundance. Because the reality is that people with abundance receive more abundance. You may know that term as the rich get richer. But I say abundance because it's not just about money, right? As simple as something as being a YouTube content creator. You want more and more views. You want more and more subscriptions. Because the more subscriptions you get, the more subscribers, the more watch time you get. YouTube unlocks certain things for you. You have the ability to get monetized. You could do some community stuff, blah, 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 blah. Right? You could set up a shop and all this kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Bottom line is, rich get richer, right? So if you think in abundance, you tend to get more abundance. Right? And so when you're living that life of abundance, things start to happen around you when you're in areas of people who think abundance. But if you're in areas of people thinking scarcity and just milling about and idling about and stuff like that, nothing's really coming your way in that area. Right? So this needs analysis thing, that's a huge thing. But what you want to have is your people doing the analysis. Your people designing the projects for your people. It's your people who understand the needs most. The next thing is organizational experience, active membership, organization design and dynamics. The incorporation of current trends and developments provides the opportunity to examine and evaluate the application of the subject area in real life, and to incorporate the experience of the students themselves and members of their family and community who may be active in the subject area. Well stated. The close proximity of professional, retail, studio, scientific, and manufacturing concerns would facilitate adjunctive experiences to the classroom. Additional exposure and opportunity to know of real-world application is through television, science specials, newspaper and magazines, and occasionally well-planned and relevant field trips to museums and other appropriate sites. So you see they mention television here. What I always tell, television is a tool. Television is a tool. It's how you use a tool. You could smash someone's head in with a hammer, or you could build a mansion. Your choice, right? So this talks about figure 1, identifies the principal factors in the organization of the African Centered Curriculum. Each set of learning experiences or objectives will be developed into several curricular fields. Each set will additionally correspond to the appropriate level of the development phases and be organized according to the ideological themes. In this way, objectives can be developed for students at all levels in the learning environment. So we see this chart here. You guys could download the book from the Discord. You could look at it closer yourself. It's a little bit hard to read here, but it just really goes over what we just talked about, which I think is a good place to stop for today. When we begin again, we're going to be talking about the Holocaust of African enslavement, which you saw show up several times during that reading that we did a few pages ago. The idea here is that the reason why I'm reading this book is because Akoto gives you a nice blueprint. He gives you a nice blueprint. And honestly, from what I'm seeing from the book, all you have to do is print out certain pages that we focus on, especially in this chapter of the book, towards an African Centered Curriculum, and start doing your work to fill in the bullet points. Again, African Centered Curriculum, you have options. You can try to go about it in terms of a school, where you open a school and you have children come into your school. You can do it as a supplementary education that happens on weekends. It can be something that you put together. So, for example, you might look at a lot of these entries into those 5 curricular domains, and maybe you do, similar to what I do with reading those papers. Maybe you pull a paper and you give it, you bundle them together. And, like I think last episode I talked about how in college we used to get these photocopied bundles of papers. So in lieu of having to buy a textbook, we would get these mix-matched bundles with just, Xerox copies from different books all over put together for us. And you could do something like that. You can put together these items in these little photocopies and give a stack to your learner. In fact, that's something I've been thinking about heavily after reading that Dr. John Henry Clark paper a couple episodes back. You know, sit down, put these things together, bundle it, and you pass that on to the learner. Even if the learner's in the public's full system, at least at home, they're being taught how to be proud Black equals African. You know, they're being taught how to connect to their community and to understand the needs of not only their community, but similar communities of Black equals African folks around the world. So we're going to pick up next time on Holocaust of African enslavement. Hope you guys enjoyed the reading tonight. I'll be back on Thursday reading another paper. And then Saturday, as we seem to always do nowadays, we're going to be doing a Saturday night Shoot the Breeze. Make sure if you have topics, you post them to the Discord under the Shoot the Breeze category, and we'll deal with that next Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anyway, guys, you guys be good. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.